I'll see. Y'all see the slides? Maybe some thumbs up.
Yep, sure can.
Cool. Yeah, so sorry about if any hear any other voices over here. I also only have one monitor today, but I do have the chat open, so I'll try to pause for questions and also address the chat. Oops, no, go back. So yes, welcome to your Git or GitHub info session. It's a big step from what you've been working on before, where you're just working on your code and especially JavaScript. And now you have to actually work with the tools that a lot of coders use um, in the real world and for personal projects. So if you are confused between the difference between Git and GitHub, Git is a version control system, and you don't have to worry about that yet, but it's a system, and GitHub runs on that system. So just like how we might run on the metric system or an operating system, um, that's Git. That's just kind of like the nuts and bolts of how it works, and GitHub is something that runs on that and layers over it. So those are the differences between that. Git, the 3 letters, is also command you use in the command line to do the things that we want it to do. So that's why you'll see that in the beginning of every Git command. And it looks like here we show an example of Visual Studio Code where there's an integrated terminal. It's the same deal. They're all command lines. And if you use Visual Studio Code, I think the shortcut, at least on Macs, is Control Backtick to toggle that on and off. So the command line interface. This can be very intimidating if you are new to it. I grew up on DOS and I still don't love it. But it's an interface nonetheless, just like what you see on the right here, which is probably the one you're more familiar with, where you double click to go in a folder and you scroll around, because that's also an interface. That's just a graphical user interface. So we're using the command line, which is generally more powerful. You might learn to love it for some things, but uh, when you want to do things like enter a directory, you use CD to change directory, whereas with your mouse in File Explorer, you would double click the folder. If you wanted to create a new folder, you would use the mkdir make directory function, whereas in File Explorer, I don't know, you might right click and do create new folder that way. So it's just a different way of interpreting the same stuff. So what makes this Git great is once Git is installed in a folder, it becomes a code repository. So Git allows you to track all the changes in your code, and they'll be attached to handy little commit messages here, um, and tell you who wrote these changes and when that happened. So it's kind of just like a super powered version of a folder. Think of it that way. It's a good bonus. It's nothing scary. um, and so here's another example of things you could do. You can say git log, and then you see the history of all your changes. See, like one of the first commits was in September, the last one was in November. Looks like alter egos of Mary Alice are the authors of these commits. So you can see what mood she was in at the time. So yeah, and you can't really do that as well in the graphical interface. So here you see there could be a previous version thing available, but I think you'd have to actually save it, or it looks like restore points, and it won't have all this other good information on it. And again, this is the integrated terminal in VS Code, and I'm sure other code editors have similar terminals, so they're going to be like the same. It's the same syntax. I know that I usually use a terminal to navigate my file folders in general. But then once I open the code repository, I'll use the graphical interface on the left to kind of navigate around if I don't know which file I want to edit, and then I'll do all my Git commands in this terminal, and so I don't have to leave this window, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's kind of why I think Visual Studio Code is really popular. It has the graphical, it has interface, it has the terminal, and there's actually other ways to use Git within VS Code. You can even compare branches in a pretty visual way. There's a ton of plugins, but I'm not going to go into that, and I also don't know that much about that. There's like a fun pets plugin though, if you want to get VS Code pets and have a little cat run around your screen. That's another topic for another time. But yes, that was already a lot to go over. So we have VS Code and the terminal to go through your files and your code. You have GitHub, which we'll talk about in a second, where your code can live on the cloud. And then we have, looks like GitHub Desktop, which I don't really use that much. And all of these things are going to be able to access your code and stay in sync with each other. But how does that happen? First, are there any questions before we talk about GitHub? I'll wait a minute. Okay, move on for now. So GitHub is where we're going to keep our files and kind of communicate with each other, including the assignment reviewers. And oops, let's go back. And like I said, GitHub is just something that uses, it's kind of like a Git interface to help you manage your code and be able to share it easily with other GitHub users. So let's go through it. So GitHub actually allows you to do a lot of Git actions and commands just in the browser. You see here, you can make a pull request. If you click on branches, you can make new branches. And if you're familiar already, if you started the homework, maybe when you check out branches, you do Git checkout and name a branch. You could just toggle here and look at all the code, and you can see the commit messages right in this table. So there's a lot of Git that happens on the inside, but it has this nice web interface for it. And that's what makes GitHub nice to use. So okay, I have to move this chat window so I can show you. Any questions on GitHub so far? Okay, well, we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So this is gonna be your general flow for doing the homework. And so this is just the quick and dirty of what exactly you have to do for the homework. So Code the Dream has some repositories already set up for you. I guess specifically the Eridanus Intro repo, which you will navigate to and fork. And forking is kind of the Git way of creating a copy of a repository at that time. And again, I use repository and folder kind of interchangeably. Repository is just a fancy folder that has Git installed in it or code in it, basically. So create the fork, and then you make your own version of or our own copy of whatever is from Code the Dream. From here on out, once you fork it and make your own copy, you don't really have to be concerned with the Code the Dream copy anymore. You just have this repo that says intro Eridanus, and that's what you're going to be editing from now on. And then from GitHub, and this is all done most easily over the web interface. There's ways to do everything in either interface, but this is our recommended flow. So once you fork it into your GitHub account, you will clone it into your computer. You're going to download all that information, including all of the code history and the commits and everything, all the good stuff we saw earlier. And that's how you get it to your computer. After that, we would like you to make a branch with each lesson and assignment where you'll make all the edits to your index HTML file at first, and then later there'll be other files. But the key here is that you're gonna be editing the same files each week, week to week, and build upon your changes from last week. And creating a branch allows you to have this kind of play space or sandbox where you don't have to worry about the main branch and breaking that. That will always be there for you. And you can just develop the features of lesson 2.1 and get that stuff taken care of. And then from there, when you create the branch, you're going to make your code changes. You're going to commit them, and then you're going to push them up to GitHub so that they are available to everyone on the internet, or namely your assignment reviewers. And when you look at GitHub after you push, you should see that there is not only a main branch, but whatever you name this other branch. And that'll be under the drop down that I think if you can see my cursor that I pointed out earlier, or if you click on branches on the web interface. So now you have both the main branch and your assignment branch on your computer, and you have a main branch and the assignment branch in the cloud on GitHub. So from here, we'd like you to, actually, let me just pause for questions if there are any. Okay. So get my Zoom windows back organized. So from here, we want you to create a pull request, and that will be available. They're pretty well outlined in the READMEs in that repo that you're gonna fork and clone. But a pull request, and in other systems, I use GitLab at work, and they're just called merge requests. They're all the same thing. It's in a practical application, you are making this request to get review and permission to merge it into the main branch and incorporate your code into the main code code branch. And so this is why we have you make pull requests with your branch into the main one. So it gives a single place for your assignment reviewers to take a look at all the changes that you've made, and then they're able to easily comment on them. And that's the key part. It helps to compare the main branch with the new branch you're doing the pull request for, and it'll show just the changes. And that makes it pretty valuable, because otherwise they could just look at it and be like, I guess this is fine, but then they'll see which lines you changed exactly and they'll be able to comment on them. So usually you'd wait for a review and approval in the real world, but since we'd like you to keep working on your homework if you'd like, and not be stuck behind the assignment review, you can then merge your pull request. And then once you do that, all the changes that were made in the side branch get incorporated into the main branch, and they become one and the same. And so the other branch will still exist, but they will be essentially identical once they are merged. So your computer will match your GitHub account. Right. But you have to get it back down from the GitHub account to your computer, the main branch anyway. So you will, next time you get checkout main, you're gonna wanna pull to get the latest copy from your GitHub account, since that's where you did the merge, and get that onto your computer. Any questions on that? But why are we doing all this? It does seem like a really roundabout way of getting code places, and you constantly have to clone and update your local files and push other changes, and why can't we just do it on the computer? Well, in a more realistic setting, say you have a web app and the main branch is deployed and the end user sees it. They're using Netflix, they're using Facebook, they're using something that is presumably stable and functional. but we want to add a new feature. But the feature will require testing, some QA, and possibly code breaking changes, and that needs to happen safely in other branches. So that's why we make branches off the main branch, and that way we can see the changes between the two. And furthermore, in a normal team, you'll be working on different features of the same app because one single person doesn't run Etsy or any other website that I can think of, or any big website. And so this way they can each have their own branch and incorporate those changes one by one. And like I said before, they will incorporate the differences um, from the main branch and they'll layer upon each other. So that's how they can kind of merge together. Like it's kind of like if you're just adding or subtracting and you have this employee one says +5, employee two says -2, and all that stuff. And it'll all just kind of even out to the correct number. I think that's the end of the slide deck. So are there any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so you said that after we merged whatever the last thing we did with our index file or whatever other file, then when you start again on your local computer, you have to I was confused about this. Like, do you have to copy something back from GitHub to your computer?
Yep. So you merge. Did you merge on the website?
I don't know. I'm just kind of following the instructions in the homework. So I just
Okay.
go and do those commands, but
If you didn't type in git merge main and then the name of the website on the command line, I'm assuming you clicked like a big green button or something on GitHub.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so that got merged in GitHub. And so you have to go back to your computer and check out the main branch again, and then just do git pull, and it'll grab the latest copy.
Okay. So, but why would it be different from what is on my computer if I'm the only one who pushed that out there? I don't know if
So,
I'm making any sense.
right, that makes sense. So you had your main branch, which at the very beginning didn't have an indexed HTML file, right? In like the first homework assignment.
Mhm.
And then you made a branch and you added that. So those are still different branches on your computer. One doesn't have that file, one does. And then when you push it up to GitHub, you
Mhm.
merge the index HTML file with the main branch. So now the main branch has that file, but you still need to sync that up with your local main branch that did not have it.
So I usually just do it in Visual Code Studio, and it's just like I open the same file where I stopped doing it, and it's kind of all the same. So I don't know.
Well, make sure you're in the right branch. You might have opened it in the feature branch.
Ooh, I don't know. I'm confused.
I might get kicked off in 2 minutes, but I'll come right back. My work computer keeps trying to install an update that I can't actually install. But okay, so Alberto says, reading. It's a personal access token necessary to push our repository to GitHub. I'm not sure about that token. You will have to set the remote URL. I think to author the commits, you will have to set git config to your username and things like that.
I
If
did
that
that at
makes
the
sense.
beginning, and then
Mhm.
like I verified that it was my username and my email address. But when I tried to log in through Visual Studio Code, I had issues both through the extension and also through trying to input my actual credentials, like my username and password. And I read like a little, I guess like FAQ and it guided me through creating a personal access token, and then I had to grant like several permissions, and that was the only way I was able to actually submit and push from Visual Studio Code to GitHub. That's why I was wondering if that was the only way, or I just had a weird experience with it.
Was this through HTTPS, or were you using SSH to clone? I feel like
Uh,
that's the
I created the SSH thing beforehand when I was doing the setting up Git. I'm not exactly sure how I cloned it. I think I cloned it just the way it was in the
I don't
like
think you
typing
need the
Git with
token.
the HTML.
Okay, so it's just normal URL. I don't think that's all necessary, but I guess I could take a look, or I can make sure that you clicked on the right things.
Okay.
And I'm back. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember that being part of the process. I don't know if anyone else had to do that, but it might just be some setting that you accidentally ticked to have to do that.
How would I be able to know whether I cloned the repository from the SSH or the HTML? Like, is there somewhere I can look for that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find example. So this is just some old repo I have. It would be this one versus this one. And it looks like I don't have any public keys in it, so I wouldn't be able to clone this properly if I wanted to. So if you use this, I don't think you need any special permissions. I'm able to clone anyone's repo that's public, but I can't push to it. Was that what you're having an issue with? Or no?
Can I join on the conversation? I had the
Sure.
same issue as Alberto. I also cloned the HTTPS and it
Mhm.
looked fine. I was able to add index for the first time. And then the moment that it went awry was when I tried to push it. And I tried to create the key or token, seemed to have worked. I did the test as they did in the audience project. But then if I try to push again, it just gives me the same error.
Do you have any other? Are you on your personal computer?
I am on my personal computer, but I did have tried for the first time from one account. It had some old stuff on it. I thought maybe it's just an old account that it's happening. I tried to do it on the new one, and I now have different kind of issue even before that. So I'm not sure if I'm a good test.
Okay, I will have to look at this. If one of you can recreate it now, that would be helpful. If not, then we can go offline and figure it
I
out in
was
another session.
I was able to like finally get my control, but I can share my screen and then just try to
Sure.
push it again, just see if it does the same as it did earlier.
Okay. It looks like you're in a Django
Oh,
folder.
yeah. I forgot to switch over. CD Eridanus. Oh, well, I logged in now, so I guess it's not having a problem, but I had to create, let me see if I can pull it up. I had to go in here and create a personal access token. Developer settings. And I had to create a fine grain token that has like a 30-digit thing that allows me to access it. And I guess it only worked for 30 days or something like that. But when I tried to push earlier and log in, what it would do, it would ask me for my credentials. And then when I logged in with my GitHub credentials, I even logged out of here just to make sure it was working fine. It told me that it was having a failure, like trying to gain the access.
I will look into that if several of you are having that issue.
Yeah, but I guess if anybody needs help with the personal access token, I was able to actually figure that part out and got my pull request through with that side. I just couldn't do it like through logging in directly through Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, I have no tokens. So, and I've been using it for a while, so we'll see. How many of you have tried the first lesson already? You can raise your hands. Or not. It seems like a few of you have.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So I was in a class of Dorado and I switched over to this one. Is there anything differently I need to do when doing a push and pull request, considering my assignments are already with Dorado, or can I continue as normal and it'll start showing up for this class instead?
As long as you submit the links to the pull request, I think it's fine. Mary Alice, you can confirm. You said I think the repos are the same except for a little bit of the rubric.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the rubric's the only thing that we changed between Dorado and Eridanus. So if anybody is on the call, and besides David, that's in that same boat, then yeah, you can keep working on that same repository. The only thing different, it'll be in your link that you're submitting. It'll probably have reference to Dorado instead of Eridanus, but that's the only difference at all. Is just in naming only. So you should be good to go, David.
Okay, I just want to make sure before I started doing anything or messing with it.
Yeah.
All right, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Would it be helpful to anyone to run through the process of the fork, clone, commit, push, pull workflow?
I think so, if you have time.
Yeah.
Sure. I think Mary Alice volunteered, but
Yeah.
I can do it.
No, that's
Great.
fine. I already have it up and ready. Can everybody see my screen okay? Okay, so to start from the start, hold on, let me just jump back to here. So we'd be at the Code the Dream School Eridanus Intro repository, and I'd click the fork button at the top to be able to create a new repository for myself in my GitHub account. And so we do create fork. It might look a little funky because I've also got administrative access and it's taking a minute. There we go. Okay, so then let me go back to my repositories and find it really quick. Normally, since you all aren't administrators on it, then it should take you just directly to your copy. And the way you can tell is your username will be in the top corner instead of Code the Dream School and Eridanus Intro. So that's the way you can be sure that what you're seeing here is your copy of it to start with. And then from here, you'll want to make sure that you're on HTTPS versus the SSH, because that'll be the easier way to be able to clone it, where theoretically, and hopefully you won't wind up needing any of those access tokens if you're cloning that way. But it sounds like that very well could have been the issue for how Alberto was running his, that something went awry there. So you can just click the button here to be able to copy that whole HTTP address. And then if you're using Visual Studio Code, then you can just do clone git repository and paste that address in there. And it'll start walking you through the process of, okay, where do you want to store this at? Do you want it on your desktop? Do you want it inside a folder inside your desktop? So it'll pull up your File Explorer or your Finder to say, where do you want this at? Just for ease of use, I'm just going to put it on my quick access desktop. So that way we know that's where it's going to wind up going. And I'll go through the process of cloning. And I'll say, do you want to go ahead and open it? So we'll go ahead and open it. And so as you can see, the only thing that we have right now is the instructions folder, which breaks down like each section of the rest of class and shows you instruction files on it. The instruction files that you see here in the section are going to be the exact same things that you see when we give you the links to those lessons. So everything you see here visually is the exact same thing as opening your lesson 2.1 README file. Has all the same information. If you need to see the images, you can click on the images. I think you can control click and it opens the image so you can see, oh, that's what that step 2 screenshot looks like. So it just gives you access to all of the instructions there when you clone it. If you don't have a terminal open, then you'll need to open one. Let me see where I've got it at. Terminal, new terminal. And make sure that you're in Bash. If you're in PowerShell or ZSH, I think sometimes you wind up running into some errors there, like it might not recognize your Git commands there. Okay, so we clone, and then I think the first thing it has you do is create an index.html file as one of your first instructions, and just put your name in there. And right now, all of this is happening on my main branch. So you'll either be able to see which branch you're on in parentheses at the end, or down here in the bottom, you'll be able to see which branch you're on. So really, before I even created those records, the index.html file, I should have done my git checkout lesson 2.1. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Yeah, hold on. It didn't like that I made changes before branching off. So let me just delete all of this. Okay, now let's see if it's gonna like it better when I do. Oh wait, no, I have to do B to create a new branch. That's what I was forgetting. There we go. So now I've created the new branch for lesson 2.1. All of the files are copied over from main to lesson 2.1. So now I can go ahead and create my new file. Put my name in there. And then let's go ahead and see if it will let us do our commands of adding to staging area and then committing those changes and then pushing them. So our first one's going to be git add to be able to add this new index.html file with all of its contents. And as you can see here, it's got A for that it's been added to the staging area. And one thing I wanted to kind of jump back and show you is even though I created that index.html file, I've got it only locally, because if we look back at my GitHub on my main branch, I've got the, well, I must have created a lesson 2.1 before, I suppose. I'm curious if I did that. Yeah, I must have done it on a previous demonstration. But on my main branch, there is no index.html file until I push my lesson 2.1 branch and then do the merge. So we've added it. We're going to commit it. You can add a note just to be able to remind yourself of what it was that you were doing that particular time. So like adding an index file or something of that variety. And then push it to our lesson branch. Aha, okay, so this was interesting. And this might be because I have multiple GitHub users that I log in with. So when I'm trying to push, then I did the credentials here. Alberto, is this kind of like what you saw the first time that you were doing it? Or Alexandra, did you also see this where you were, it was prompting you to log in?
I never got that.
Okay.
I would only get it like up at the top where it has the like the name for the file, it would disappear, and then it asked me if I wanted to like grant an extension permission to log in remotely,
Oh,
which I thought it
interesting.
would be easier.
Mhm.
And it just never like it would never grant through the extension. So then I'd put my credentials. I just want to get it like an extra pop-up window. I don't know if it's different because I'm running a MacBook, but I never see the pop-up window. It would just ask me for my
Okay.
credentials on top of the file.
I'm wondering too, actually, now that we're talking about it a little bit more, Diana, I'm wondering if it's not a case of whether or not the person's using their laptop as the administrative user. I wonder if that has anything to play into it as far as how their personal computer's set up.
Oh, that is interesting. Maybe.
Yeah. See, I'm getting an error too, guys. Don't worry, it happens to everybody. All right, let me take a look and see what we've got. Fail to push some refs to. Is this similar to the error that you were seeing, Alexandra, as far as it was just giving you a failure when you tried to push?
No, I think no. Mine was also regarding the token and authorization issue. I feel
Okay.
like yours is more like a branch diversion. I don't know. Maybe, I
Yeah,
don't know.
this one I think because I had that 2-1. Yeah, so I had that 2-1 that existed before. And this will kind of show you if you do have any kind of issues between, well, you're trying to pull content, if you do a git pull origin main, and it says, hold on, there's a conflict, it'll warn you, hey, there's a conflict, and it'll show you which files have a difference. And it'll tell you which one you want to be able to do, just to be able to kind of sync them up at that point. And then let me just hit resolve to be able to kind of complete that to make sure. There we go. Okay. All right, so say I wanted to create a separate part. So now I've changed that file again. We add those changes. We can do git status to be able to check and see, okay, what are the changes that we're adding? We're adding the index.html changes that I made for that line 3. And then git commit. Run git status again, and then we can see, okay, we've committed those changes. So now we just need to push those changes, that extra line 3 that I just added. And I want to push it to the branch that I'm working on currently. Okay, so this is typically what you want to see when you're doing a push, is enumerating objects, any changes that you made. It'll say this is how many changes there were and they're done. Compressing objects, getting it all up to date. So now if we were to take a look back at my lesson 2.1 branch, it has that index.html. It has the note that I added a line. And if we look at it, we can see that third line, I like coding. But when we look back at our main branch, it's not going to have any of that. But when we take a look back at our main branch, it doesn't even have my index.html. It doesn't have anything there because I haven't merged from lesson 2.1 to my main branch yet. So this, unfortunately, this part isn't really helping Alexander and Alberto as far as errors being able to push. Do either of you have it up that we can kind of work through that while you're on the call?
For me, it just worked when I was following along just right now. I
Oh,
think
good.
my
Okay.
issue was with the bash, like you mentioned in the VS Code. So
Yeah.
now I followed along and it actually worked right now.
Perfect. Good. Yeah. Usually if it gives you an error about like it doesn't understand Git commands, that's a clue that you're in something other than bash terminal.
Yeah, I was able to push and make the pull request. It's just I wasn't able to do it without the personal access token. Like I
Okay.
wasn't able to just log in directly through the studio and do it.
Yeah.
And are you guys merging the repositories or should we do that?
You all will take care of doing that on your own. So let me go ahead and do that part next so that way you all can see. So let me see, is this one from my lesson 2.1? Okay, yeah. So I had already had an open pull request. I think it was when I was making a demonstration video that I had a lot of this stuff already done. So that's why I was running into some issues of like, wait a minute, you already did this. And so even though I've committed changes after I opened this pull request before, so I opened this pull request like it must have been, you know, whenever I did this particular line, you know, several weeks ago or whatever. But commit during GitHub workshop added a line. These were changes that I made just now when we were on the call together. But the very first pull request that I did with lesson 2.1, I left it open. I haven't merged it to main. That's why you're not seeing the index HTML in the main yet. But you are still seeing the additional commits that you're doing to be able to update it. So to do a pull request, typically when you do a push to your lesson 2.1 branch on your main screen, it'll have a yellow box at the top that says, hey, you just pushed some new code that's different. Do you want to create a pull request? Or you can also go to your pull request tab and do new pull request. And you'll specify where it's coming from and where it's going to. So right now it's going to try and compare my main branch to the Code the Dream School main branch, and you want to avoid that. So in this example, I wanted lesson 2.1 to be compared to my main. So I want to select my repository, and it changes it so that way we know, okay, we're staying within the same repository. We're not trying to compare my repository to Code the Dream School repository. I'm just trying to compare my branch to my main branch. So you want to do that compare lesson 2.1 to main, and it'll wind up creating a pull request that looks like so, since I already have this one open. And I'll say, go ahead and merge pull request. If it tells you there's errors that need to be resolved before you can merge, then it should have a gray box that says, you know, resolve merge conflict along those lines to be able to click through there. But if everything's good, you get the green checkbox saying, yeah, there's not going to be any conflict between what you wrote in lesson 2.1 and what you already have in main. So you just click merge pull request, confirm merge. And then when we go back to our code and look at our main branch here, I've got my index HTML. Yay, good, it's there. And it even has the added align note. If you look at the index HTML, it's got my first and my third lines of content there. So the reason that we wind up doing that pull back, that was the question that we were talking about earlier about why do we have to pull from main back down to our local. So let me jump back over to here and hold on, let me go back to File Explorer. So right now I'm on lesson 2.1 branch locally on my computer, and I've got my index HTML and I've got my 3 lines of code there. When I go back to my main branch though, uh-oh, where'd my index HTML file go? Look, it doesn't exist anymore, right? Because I hadn't pulled down the changes that I made here, like my index HTML is here because I merged it from 2.1 to main in GitHub only. So then in VS Code or locally in your command line, then you need to do git pull origin main to be able to bring those changes that you took from 2.1, moved over to your main in GitHub and bring them down to your local computer. And now you can see I'm on main. I've got that index HTML now. It's got those 3 lines of code. So it's sort of like this weird, awkward little square dance where you've got like your local stuff on main. You branch off, so you do a little side step of the square to get to your feature branch or your lesson branch. Then you push that lesson branch up to GitHub. And then the GitHub lesson branch does a side step over to main to be able to merge your assignment work back to your main. And then you pull it back down to get to your starting point of your square. Sorry, I just realized I have my camera covered, so that didn't make any sense. But visually, you got your main local, you branch off to do your lesson branch. You push that lesson branch up to GitHub. In GitHub, you have to take that lesson branch, merge it over to your main, and then you take the main and pull it back down to your local main to be able to complete the square so that all 4 copies are all including everything from your lesson assignment. Does that help give a little bit better visual or help make it make sense some? Okay, I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up. Good, good. Did anybody that was working through it and still have errors want to bring them up to show them so that we can all work through it at all? Okay. Does anybody need me to re-demonstrate or show anything else different about what I did in Visual Studio Code or in the GitHub web page that shows you your cloud sourcing of all of your stuff that you're pushing up? Okay, I'm going to stop share then and pass it back over to Diana for any other questions.
Oh, there is one other thing I forgot. If you could share again, actually.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
on my work computer, so I can't.
That's fine. That's
much.
totally fine.
Like, if I
I
tried to
completely
push, I don't
understand.
know what would happen. So when you were if you right click on README on the README.md file, you can open preview, which gives you a nicer way of looking at things.
Oh, nice. I didn't even know about that. Thanks. Man. That's awesome.
So yeah, just
You can also do
call
split
it out.
screens too. So it's not going to matter for the first several weeks, but when y'all start getting into having HTML files and style files that you're working with as well, then you can split it. So if you want like, oh, I'm going to keep my homework instructions over here, and then I'm going to keep my index HTML that I'm working with over here. You can do it along those lines too. And actually, that might be a really helpful tool for a lot of you folks to be able to have them side by side. So it's like, okay, here's my instructions. This is the exact same content from the coding assignment page, you know, that information page. So you can just kind of work your way through it. It's always nice to be able to do split screens, and you can split that screen into multiples. Like if you really want to get fancy, you can have a bunch of different files all across there, however much you need to. Any other questions or anything else you want me to demonstrate, Diana? Well, I've got my screen share on.
That was it. It came up and
Okay.
thought about it, and then I didn't jump in.
Yeah. Oh, so to further, so now that I've got main caught up, now like, and then you can start the next lesson week by doing, you know, git checkout, create a new branch, and then next time we'll be on lesson 3.1. And that way it creates that new branch for you where you can then do whatever the 3.1 assignment is, to be able to work through that process and make whatever changes you need to make for your index HTML there, and you know, kind of go that way. But whenever you branch off of something, so doing this lesson 3.1 branch, it copied everything that I had in main. And that's why you want to update your main local before you start your next week's assignment. So that way, all of those changes you made in lesson 2.1 have updated your main, both on GitHub and locally. So that way you won't start lesson 3.1 branch and then not have your index HTML file with your lines of code in there, to be able to continue working with.
Though to be clear, if you do miss a step, Git makes it so that you can always fix it. So if you want, if anything happens, just let me or one of the mentors know, and we could probably walk you through it.
Absolutely.
Learn
Yeah.
a lot in the process.
There have been a couple of times we've had students that are like, I'm just going to tear it all out and start from the beginning. I'm a crocheter and knitter, and so it's not uncommon to like rip out lines of, you know, stitching that you're doing. But don't do that. That's exactly what commit is there for. It's to keep you from having to be like, well, back to the drawing board and throwing the whole thing in the trash. Like, it gets you back to your last working version if need be, so that way you can pick up from there and do what you need to.
The question is, should we delete the branch after merge? I have been giving, I think it's just up to you. I tend to hoard everything and I don't delete things. What I don't know is if the PR gets messed up if you delete the branch. That I don't know.
I'm going to test it really quick and find out and see
Okay.
if you have an open PR and delete the branch versus if you have a
Yeah.
closed PR and delete the branch. I'll see what happens.
So the answer is best practice, yes, eventually, since it's merged in. But I don't think it's that important. Are there any other questions while we get that tested?
Hi, I have a question. Can you maybe you remember what kind of extension you have to show what the current branch it is in the console? You showing that there is a blue font like main or another branch?
Yeah, I was trying to remember if that was an extension that I put in or not. If you don't happen to have it here at the end of your line, which I think is a default whenever you're in Bash, I think it shows your branch at the end in parentheses. But worst case scenario, it will always be in this bottom left when you're in Visual Studio Code. It should always show there for what branch you're working on. Does that answer the question, or?
Yeah, but probably I just don't have it there. But yeah, I know that it's on the left bottom, you can see it. Yeah.
Okay, so you're not seeing it here at the end of the line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me do a little digging online for you on town because I think it probably is just a matter of like you can go into your command palette and change a setting or something. Let me Google that quick and I'll find out for you.
Oh,
It really
and
should
I
default
don't
to
have brush.
something.
I have ZS something.
Oh, ZSH, that should
Yeah.
work as well. That's what I use.
No, it doesn't show. So I need to switch to brush.
Oh, here we go. Okay, I think I just found it. Let me go ahead and
Oh,
screen
okay.
share so that way you can get a visual on it, Anton. Okay, there we go. All right, so it says we want to do from menu, you'll go to view, appearance, and then status bar. Oh, no, that only just shows that part. Okay. So that took out the bottom portion as far as that goes. Let me see about show branching terminal.
Anton, have you so you've done every other part of the steps and it's not showing the branch?
Yeah, it's not a kind of critical. It's just you know, like nice to have. Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought it was the default as well, so I'm not sure. On my Mac, I have Starship ZSH installed, and that definitely does it. But I haven't configured that in a while.
No worries. Probably it's because it's not Bash.
Yeah, I think that's probably all it is because I know like if I were to open a new terminal that is PowerShell instead, then it'll still give me as far as like my directory as far as what I'm inside of, but it won't show me which branch I'm on there. So I think it's the default for when you're in Bash. But if you wind up being in a Bash terminal, Anton, and you're still not seeing it, let Diana or I know, and we'll do a little more digging to be able to find what we need to find for it.
I just pasted what the like CSH
Okay.
config sort of file is. So you might have to edit that to load Git in it, and it should show the branch. ZSHRC.
I'm deleting my 2.1 branch right now to see what winds up happening with it, Diana, so I can give some real-time info. Okay, deleting a closed one definitely did not affect anything. And then let me create a new pull request from 3.1 to my main, just to see what happens with that. Okay, yeah, if you try and delete your lesson branch before you've merged it to main and you have an open pull request out on that lesson branch, then it'll give you a warning saying if you delete it, then whatever you pushed is not gonna, you're not gonna be able to complete that pull request. So make sure you've merged any pull requests from that branch before you delete the branch. So that way you don't accidentally delete any of the work that you put in there and pushed.
Okay, that's good. So if it doesn't give you a warning, you can delete it.
Exactly, yeah. Thank
For-
God for alerts and warnings. Like, are you sure you want to delete?
My response in the chat was to Alberto, but in general, yes. If you make any changes to your local files, you have to push it to get it up to GitHub. That's just how it's going to be.
And version control can always be a weird concept to grapple with when you're first learning too. I usually use the analogy of like, if you were going to publish a book with a printing company, version control is a way for you to be able to keep track of the different drafts of the book before it's finalized and can go to the printers. So your main branch is what the printer copy will be, but all of your lesson branches and all of your features and things like that are all going to be sort of your works in progress until you know, okay, yeah, this has been spell checked. It's good to go. Let's go ahead and send it off to the printer, so to speak. Did you have a question, Michael?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. It was my little hand cursor over top of your Zoom. Like, oh my goodness, I need some coffee. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording then if there aren't any other questions or demos that we need to do.